Swanee, God has smiled on the Gators, no question about it.
Alrighty, so the Florida Gators know what their date is on Friday. They get the number one seed yet again, and they're going to face the winner of Prairie View A&M versus Lehigh, and they're going to play Friday in Tampa at 9:25 p.m. I know it's a late night, but the Gators get to stay in the state and they don't have to change time zones. So I don't think playing late at night should be that big of a trade-off. Plus, they've played games. I think there was didn't they play like Oklahoma at like 9:30 or something like that, and they were in more central time zone. So it shouldn't really make that big of a difference. But to talk about the Florida and their prospect in this tournament. So Selection Sunday has come and Selection Sunday has passed. The bracket is set. March Madness is upon us. For the second straight season, the Gators men's hoops will embark as the number one seed of their region. They are in the South region. They will commence on Friday, and they get the privilege of staying in their state as they will travel to Tampa for their first round game. They will see the winner of a first four matchup between Prairie View A&M versus Lehigh. It all goes back to how Florida competed against Quadrant 1 teams and how they actually have a high record against teams that are in the tournament. That'll be coming up in a little bit. Florida will have 5 days to shake off the disappointment in their loss to Vanderbilt. Now, I wrote this during Sunday, but I'm recording this Monday today, and I'm going to try to upload it before 2 o'clock. It was like I said after the game, there's still games to be won. The number one seed also supports the simple fact Florida was the best team in the SEC. No other team from the conference got as high as the number two seed. Alabama had the second highest seeding of any team in the conference at number four in the Midwest region. Florida has a record against all Quadrant 1 teams that are in the tournament in Quadrant 1 games, 12-6, which includes a victory over Vanderbilt. So people are saying that, well, Florida was maybe a little bit overrated because of the loss to Vanderbilt. Florida beat Vanderbilt earlier in January. The loss to Vanderbilt doesn't make Vanderbilt an overrated team or Florida an overrated team. It was just a very good performance by Vanderbilt and not up to the performance standards that which you come to expect from Todd Golden coach teams. And it's okay to say that. So half of the games that I said the 12-6 record against fellow tournament opponents, half of that came from the conference, and that's an important thing to note because the SEC landed 10 selections from the committee. So in a conference that led the nation in tournament selections, 10 from the SEC, Florida won that conference by 3 games. That's pretty impressive, and that tells you how good Florida is. The team that won the conference tournament, Arkansas, got throttled by the Gators in Gainesville a few weeks ago. So the team that won the tournament, Arkansas, they had a tough time with Florida. It doesn't make them or make Florida look even worse because of the loss to Vanderbilt. Florida has shown throughout the year that they can beat the high-scoring opponents. They just didn't have an answer for Vanderbilt, a Vanderbilt team that Florida beat on the road back in January. This is a good Gator squad. They're not what they were last year, obviously, but the losses that they had from the shooting guard position with Aberdeen leaving and Clayton leaving and Elijah Martin leaving and Will Richard leaving. So obviously there's a big serious setback that they have for clutch shooting, but it's still relatively a deep team. They play about 8 men deep like they did last year. They just don't have the shooting that they did last year. If they could do a better job of avoiding turnovers and stop jacking up desperate threes the moment adversity hits, they have a high ceiling in this tournament. When Florida is on a roll, it is a very unstoppable roller coaster. The problem is, like a roller coaster, even in victory, sometimes that play goes up and down. Florida dominates a lot of teams, but when they're off, they can get really off, as Vanderbilt took advantage of that, rightfully so. So they can get away with playing with being a little reckless with the turnovers in the first round, maybe even the second round. But when you get to that Sweet 16 or you get to that Elite 8, like you did last year, you're gonna have to hold on for a second. Excuse me, neighbors are making noise outside. Okay, we're back. Sorry about that. Neighbors were making too much noise, and you could hear it in the background. As I was saying, Florida could get away with maybe a little bit of sloppy turnovers in the first round, maybe in the second round. But as you get deeper into that tournament and the level of teams that you face elevates and elevates and elevates, that's gonna get you an early exit in the Sweet 16 or maybe even the Elite Eight. But that's either way, you're not going to be repeating as champions. So that was the point that I was making before I had to take that break there. Now, in terms of the bracket that Florida's in, like I said, Florida's in the South Regional. If they were to go to South, if they would go to the regional finals, would be the Elite Eight. That would be in Houston. Florida's bracket, as I said before, also includes Clemson versus Iowa, and then you got Vanderbilt versus McNeese, Nebraska versus Troy, North Carolina versus VCU, Penn against St. Mary, and Texas A&M against Penn against St. Mary, Texas A&M Houston against Idaho, St. Mary against Texas A&M, Illinois versus Penn, North Carolina versus VCU, Nebraska versus Troy, Vanderbilt versus McNeese, and Iowa versus Clemson. So that's that bracket right there. I messed up the reading there for a second because I'm looking far away from my screen. That's a very tough bracket to play in, having to play against maybe Houston, who would like revenge after you beat them in the tournament final last year, the national final that is. North Carolina versus VCU. VCU could give North Carolina some trouble. That to me is like the most interesting matchup of the first round in this bracket. Nebraska, a very good team. I haven't got a chance to watch them too much because they're in the Big Ten, but Troy would be an interesting matchup between them. And you got Iowa and Clemson. So it's not an easy region for Florida to embark on, even as the number one seed, and they're certainly not as deep as they were last year. But I don't think it's undoable. I think it would just, maybe the toughest teams to face would be Houston. It would be tough to play Vanderbilt again, because if they go back on that shooting stretch that they went on when they beat Florida in the semifinals, they would be a tough team to beat. And then I think maybe even VCU would potentially be a third team that could give Florida a run for their money in this region. That's still in the first round. So all in all, should be a fun tournament. I think Florida should be able to win about 2 or 3 more games, maybe get to the Sweet 16 Elite 8 range, and then we'll see where things go on from there. So I'm not going to drag this video out too long. We'll see Florida on Friday against the winner of Prairie View A&M versus Lehigh.